everyone, to the third workshop of the 2025 Research and Policy Symposium on Gender Equality in and Through Education, Skill-Based Education for Empowering Young Women and Girls for Justice, Sustainable Livelihoods in the Post-Conflict Northern Uganda region, led by our Echidna scholar, Betty Akulo. My name is Samaya Mansour, and I'm a research associate on the gender team at the Center for Universal Education at Brookings. And I co-lead the Echidna Global Scholars Program with Senior Fellow and Deputy Director Jen O'Donoghue. As we get started, please take a moment to share in the chat your name, where you're joining us from, and which organization you're with. And just a few housekeeping reminders. We are recording this session and we'll be posting it to the symposium event page where it will be available to the public. So please know that your participation will be public. Please keep yourself muted and your video off until the breakout room portion of the workshop. And if you want to ask a question, please type your name, your question, and who your question is for in the chat box. The goal of these workshops is to provide a space for a deep dive into the research of each of our 2025 Echidna Global Scholars. With the participation of both global and local experts, we hope to understand their research both as part of the broader conversation on this topic and within local contexts for policy and practice. In addition, we'll provide space for all of you to meet, share, and learn with and from one another. But before I get started, I just want to share with you a bit about our program. The program started in 2012, and it aims to strengthen the capacity of local leaders to drive evidence-based change in gender equality in and through education in the Global South and around the world. It begins with a 6-month fellowship at Brookings, during which the scholars pursue their research focused on improving learning opportunities and life outcomes for girls, young women, and gender non-conforming people in their local contexts. And upon completion of the fellowship, the scholars transition to the network, where we continue to work together to promote significant, sustained, and collective influence on gender equality and education locally, regionally, and globally. And since its inception in 2012, the program has hosted 14 cohorts of fellows, and it serves an alumni network of 48 scholars from 25 different countries. It's truly our privilege to spend our days learning with and from this group of powerful leaders. Our agenda for this hour and a half is as follows. Echidna scholar Betty Akulo will present key findings and recommendations from her research and then engage you all in breakout room discussions. We will be joined by 2 experts who will respond to her research. And after this, there will be an initial Q&A session with Betty and her discussants. Then we'll move into the more interactive portion of the workshop, in which we'll participate in breakout room discussions and then return to share some of the highlights of your conversations. But before we get started, I'm just going to introduce Betty very quickly. Betty is the Executive Director of Women and Rural Development Networks, and a women's rights organization she founded in 2003 to help women and girls rebuild their lives in Northern Uganda after conflict. She's also a human rights lawyer and an advocate with over 20 years of experience. Betty specializes in gender equality, peace building, and legal protection for women. Her leadership has driven programs on economic empowerment, climate resilience, and gender-based violence. Recognized as a national gender champion, Betty continues to amplify women's voices locally and globally. Betty, over to you.
Maya, I'm grateful for the warm introduction. Good morning, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, and good night to some of you. I welcome you to this deep dive workshop today. Thank you for sparing your time. My appreciation goes to the people who have been with me from the process when I started collecting this data to today when I'm doing the presenting. I'm doing the presenting of the study that I did on skill-based education for empowering women and girls for justice and sustainable livelihoods in the post-conflict Northern Uganda. Please, as you join in, indicate your name, continue to indicate your names and where you're joining from. At the same time, please answer this this question about what are the elements of a skill-based, justice-oriented education? What does it mean to you? So keep posting the responses in the chat box. We will later look at the responses when I'm presenting a slide on justice-oriented education. So leave your answers in the chat box. And also feel free to participate throughout this session. Thank you so much. So like Samaya said, I'm from Northern Uganda. I have experience of over 20 years working on the issue of gender equality. I founded this organization in order to address injustices and poverty affecting marginalized women and girls through empowerment, socioeconomic, and political participation. I am an Echidna scholar. I am passionate about girls' empowerment, and I'm convinced that education can change society only when we work together. So today, I'm going to share with you the experiences and stories and voices of these girls you see in this picture. These are girls I talked to when I was doing the focus group discussion in Lamour district. So I started by telling them about my story as a girl, how I grew up, and how I went through school. So in order to build rapport or to break the ice, as they say, so that they can easily have a conversation with me. So these are the girls we are going to talk about today. So on the map, you see the part marked yellow. That is actually sub-region. This is where I did the study. This was the epicenter of conflict that lasted for more than 20 years between the government of Uganda and the Lord's Resistance Army. And during this period, schools were destroyed, livelihoods were disrupted, community support systems were weakened. The most affected by this conflict were women and girls. Girls in the region in Northern Uganda continue to face systemic barriers and post-conflict realities that shape their education journeys. While each girl's experience is unique, there are common threads. One is disrupted education due to poverty. Many girls continue to drop out of school due to pregnancies. Many face gender-based violence. They are married off early. They continue to face cultural stigma and heavy domestic roles, among others. So despite these challenges that I've talked about, the girls continue to demonstrate agency and have aspiration. So the legacies of conflict and fragile infrastructure compound the problems that these girls face. So I'll share with you two problems that I was interrogating. One is, despite the efforts of government, or the efforts government has put in place through the policies, through the laws and initiatives, we still find that formal education in Uganda is still largely exam-based with limited job-related and skill empowerment for girls. In other words, there is a mismatch from what the school is teaching and what the girls want to learn. These learning gaps reduce girls' confidence and limit their ability to transition to secondary or vocational education. Even when girls stay in school, the exam-based system doesn't prepare them for real-life challenges they face or give them practical skills and agency they need to rebuild their lives and communities. So in my work, I kept asking, what kind of education truly meets the needs of these girls in this context? Second problem is that the Acholi sub-region, which was the epicenter of conflict, as I said, has very limited skill-based training opportunities. There is only one vocational training institute by government serving more than 8 districts. Alongside, we have a non-governmental organization supported centers. Even when we have these centers, girls are still underrepresented in these skilling programs. In addition, most of the programs are short-term or last between 2 to 6 months, mainly focusing on basic survival skills with limited emphasis on building girls' agency, rights, or long-term empowerment. So, due to funding constraints and weak links to market opportunities, these programs fail to provide sustainable livelihoods, reinforcing unemployment, poverty, and low community resilience. Besides, most of the courses offered are mainly those supporting gender stereotypes. These courses limit their income, potential, and reproduce gender hierarchies instead of challenging them. So, to develop a justice-oriented education model, that responds to the lived realities of girls I'm talking about. I examine their aspirations, needs, and the enablers and barriers that they encounter on the road to achieve them. So I did this study in Kitgum and Lamour, and I used qualitative approach. And I centered girls' experiences through focus group discussions, storytelling, and workshops. I also conducted key informant interviews with key actors. I reached out to 36 respondents, 14 in-school girls, 14 out-of-school girls, and 8 key informants who included teachers, policymakers, parents, and heads of departments. So to start off our conversation with girls, I asked them about their aspirations. I was amazed by what they said. I could see hope in these girls' eyes. One girl said, and I quote her, "I want to be a lawyer. I want to defend the rights of other girls because I see how girls are abused and exploited in my community." Across all these conversations, the aspirations of girls focused on 3 important areas: education for empowerment, livelihood, and economic independence, justice, and recognition. As noted, dreams of this girl was not only about personal ambitions, but a collective yearning for dignity, equality, and social justice within the systems that have long marginalized them. In addition, there was a critical divide between the girls in school and what they expressed. The girls in schools talked about long-term ambitions, such as becoming teachers, lawyers, or leaders, as opposed to those girls who were out of school, whose main focus was about immediate survival or caregiving, because some of them had children. So they are thinking about food, they are thinking about what they can survive on immediately. So this contrast between these girls in and out of school underscores the need for justice-oriented education that equips girls with relevant skills, restores hope, and transforms their aspirations into attainable futures. We talked about their needs, the girls' needs. The girls revealed that to realize their aspirations, they require practical and strategic needs. The practical needs include immediate things they need to navigate their day-to-day lives, such as sanitary wear, food, and school supplies. The strategic needs they talked about are of long term, and these include mentorship, leadership development, gender transformative curriculum, legal protection, stigma reduction, among others. So providing practical needs reduces immediate vulnerability, while meeting strategic needs changes the social relations that cause the vulnerability. Providing only one need is not enough. The two must meet together. So a justice-oriented, skill-based education, therefore, brings the two together, the immediate support, while also building girls' confidence, capacity, and leadership to challenge these systems that hold them back. We talked about skills. The girls made it clear that the skills they need must go beyond the passing exams. For example, one girl said, "I need to get hands-on skills to manage myself and my surrounding so that I don't mess up my life." They talked about critical thinking. They talked about solving problems, decision-making. This is what the girls want, not about cramming exams. They want something that makes them live and challenge, have ways of challenging their day-to-day lives or issues that they interface with. So if these are the skills that the girls are talking about, then what can we do together to ensure that they get these skills? What can we do? What the girls are saying is that they need an integrated education model that combines the technical skills they get with life skills that helps them to navigate their day-to-day lives. We also talked about the formal education. My discussions with the girls showed that the formal education does not adequately meet girls' lived realities because it's mostly exam-based. As was said by one girl, most of the subjects we are learning were just theory, not things that I can use to survive. The school environment is characterized by big class sizes, absenteeism, and little mentorship, further limiting their growth and preventing them from building confidence, leadership, and critical thinking. We talked about barriers. So while talking about the barriers, the girls revealed social-cultural barriers. For example, girls are sometimes considered a source of income when they are, for example, they are married off to sustain the family during hard times. The other was structural barriers, which include weak re-entry policies, which still exclude young mothers from participating in school because some of them have children. And some schools do not allow mothers who have given birth to get back to school. So while the other barrier is institutional barriers, they mentioned rigid school schedules, for example, for breastfeeding mothers. We talked also about enablers. The girls spoke about family, community, and institutional support, and policies as well as support system that helps them to realize their aspirations. Currently, this support system, the family, community, institutions, and policies, they are not talking one language, they are fragmented. The whole promises of hope, though, for they provide care, financial support, emotional encouragement, mentorship, and links to practical opportunities for girls. And I remember one girl saying, my mother cares for my baby when I go back to school. So these everyday acts of care make education possible for many girls. But these pockets of promise show that justice-oriented future is possible, or it is emerging every day through this relationship, practices, policies surrounding these girls. What is needed now is to strengthen, scale, and decentralize this support system so that every girl in Northern Uganda can thrive, not by chance, but by design. So at the beginning, I asked you to put in your responses about the elements of skill-based education. So we are going to look at it. Based on the discussions which I had with girls, they proposed a skill-based justice-oriented education. And from your responses, I can see some of them. So I request you to reflect as I go to the next slide. Reflect on the questions, on the responses you put there. I asked you to respond to what are the elements of a skill-based education. So we can reflect together in the next slide. So based on the responses or what I discussed with the girls and their voices, they said the following are the ideas they have for a justice-oriented education. So to them, a justice-oriented education is one that provides psychosocial support to them, is one that promotes their agency and their rights, like they have abilities to make decisions, to voice up their concerns and their rights. Is one where there is cohesive policies and laws that works in their favor. Is one where they have economic empowerment. So these are the elements of what the girls talked about. And I see some of your responses relates to this. But we continue to build this model together. This is a model that we continue to build to ensure a justice-oriented, skill-based education. The recommendations to the Ministry of Education. There is need to integrate skills girls want and need into education policy and programs and curriculum. To the Ministry of Gender, and I'm happy that Angela is here, there is need to promote gender-responsive, justice-oriented initiatives that advance girls' rights, agency, and economic empowerment. Again, to the Ministry of Gender, to the Ministry of Education, local governments, or partners and NGOs, it is important to ensure cohesive implementation of justice-oriented skill-based education model. And lastly, I want to thank you for listening. to the experiences and stories of these girls from Northern Uganda. So when we center girls' lived experiences, we address the real needs of girls, and this is what justice means to them. So the picture there means justice. The girls are saying we need justice, and that is the challenge I leave with all of you today. Thank you so much. I want to hand over to Samaya.
Thank you so much, Betty. What a powerful presentation. And thank you again for amplifying the voices of girls and sharing the important work you've been doing with us over the past few months. And honestly, like, you continue to inspire us all with your passion, with your dedication, and your commitment. I would now like to invite our first discussant, Fatima Zahra, to join us on screen. Yeah, there you are, Fatima. Thank you. Fatima Zahra is a social demographer and an associate at the Girls Center Population Council based in Washington, D.C. Her research has focused on gender and adolescence in low and middle income countries across a range of areas, including education, health, empowerment, child marriage, and more recently, adolescent girls' empowerment in humanitarian settings. Fatima, given your work with the POP Council, could you help us understand and situate Betty's research within this broader conversation around gender equality and skill-based education?
Thank you very much, Samia. And I also want to echo what you said earlier. I think, Betty, first of all, thank you for sharing this work. I think it's very important, and I think your passion for it really shines through. And I think research is always enriched when the person doing it cares about the outcome. So thank you for that. Yeah, I'm going to share some reflections based on our research and also what the global evidence says, regarding this broader area that Betty has talked about. And I want to start with sort of taking a step back a little bit and talking about broader frameworks of empowerment. I think, Betty, you talked about that in your presentation quite a bit. What I'm sharing here is a framework that we worked on with the Center for Global Development and the World Bank last year. This is part of a report that was published. It's called the Pathways to Prosperity, for adolescent girls in Africa. And some of the components of this are what you would expect in traditional empowerment frameworks, right? So human capital, education and health, other enabling resources, for example, social capital and financial capital, or you might call them life skills, agency, and more importantly, context. And when we think of empowerment, we also think of the fact that these components interact with one another, right? So, and Betty, in your presentation, you talked about agency quite a bit. So agency is, impacted by other resources. So, for example, if you have a lot of financial capital, you may feel that you can make certain decisions about your life. And vice versa, like not having that much agency might impact, whether or not you continue school, for example, or whether or not you're able to work. So really thinking about how these components interact with one another, and for what purpose. And then one of the things that, we wanted to think about in this framework was not empowerment as a static concept, but particularly for adolescents, I would say, which is the population that you were talking about. But looking at it as a process over time. So girls may gain different sources of empowerment over time, but these pathways really depend on their experiences, and it's not the same for everyone. And some of those experiences might include, the fact that they drop out of school early, maybe, or that they are married, or they're located in a certain place, let's say a rural area that comes with certain labor market opportunities that may enable or limit their ability to work in certain areas, right? There was a mention of a girl who wanted to become a lawyer. How would she go about doing that in the place where she lives? What resources are available to her? What role models are there around her, etc. And when we think of conflict settings, we thought of these pathways as examples of different girls. These are based on what the trends that we saw in data when we analyzed DHS data from across sub-Saharan Africa. And one of the examples of the girls we have here is Miriam, who resides in a fragile conflict and violent setting, in a rural area, dropped out of school early, not working, and at risk of early marriage. And what this really sort of reflects is that girls in conflict and post-conflict settings, first of all, have access to, different sources of human capital, different enabling resources, so different kinds of social capital, financial capital, and perhaps different levels of agency, and all of this is really determined by the context that they are in, or in post-conflict settings in particular, all the things that not just they have lived through, but also what their parents have lived through as well. And so we do just, theoretically, conceptually, but also in reality, girls in conflict and post-conflict settings require more holistic support and more consistently than they might need it in other settings to enable positive pathways to empowerment during adolescence and adulthood. And sort of situating this evidence that Betty shared in broader global trends of what we know about girls residing in FCV context. So the same report where we published the framework that I just shared with you also did analysis across sub-Saharan Africa to see whether girls in FCV countries have different trends relative to girls in non-FCV countries, and we did find that girls in these contexts are more likely to marry early and have children, less likely to be in school or have a bank account. And I think a lot of this is also was also reflected in the research that Betty shared. There is also global evidence from there's also global evidence from conflict settings. Showing that girls have worse mental health outcomes relative to boys, although there's very limited evidence on this. Sorry, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, there's a power issue where I am. Apologies. I'm actually joining from Nairobi. This is something, but let me know if you can't hear me anymore or yeah. All right. Where was I? So global evidence from conflict settings, also shows, and this is something that you would expect, that mental health outcomes are worse for everyone, but also for girls relative to boys, and girls experience very high rates of gender-based violence. I think the global statistic is 70% of girls in conflict settings versus, in regular settings, I believe it's around 1 in 3. And this resonates with what Betty shared as well. When it comes to program design, I think, just based on the evidence that we have, there's very limited evidence from programs that target girls in humanitarian settings, particularly on education. This is not our work. This is work that was done by ODI, I believe, last year. They did a review of interventions that work for girls in humanitarian settings and covered 3 outcomes, including mental health and education and gender-based violence. And the conclusion was there really isn't a lot of emphasis on education in terms of the evidence that we have, perhaps not regarding, service delivery. So we're not really able to say, what works, what doesn't. But there are many different types of interventions that have been tried. I know there's one study in post-conflict Afghanistan, for example, where community-based education really worked. So, they tried to reduce the distance that girls would need to travel in order to access education, and that really improved their educational outcomes because it lowered their exposure to conflict. So that's sort of one example of this. I would say more generally, sort of, looking outside humanitarian settings, we do know from our own work RCTs that we've done in Kenya and other places, that multi-sectoral approaches not only work, but that they're necessary for girls because girls have, holistic needs. This is something that has been reflected, by girls themselves in Betty's study. There are several different types of interventions that have been shown to be effective or promising in improving these outcomes. So in some cases, you might combine formal education with skills-based education. In other cases, you might combine it with certain health incentives. So there is some evidence out there, some of which involves skill building. I think the most compelling evidence that includes, all the skills that Betty talked about. Also includes comprehensive economic empowerment programs. So these are really cash plus programs that also include, vocational skills and life skills and agency building, etc. And lastly, I think programs must consider, what skills are relevant. I think, Betty, this was one of your conclusions as well. And for who, I think it's not enough to, give somebody a skill where they can't earn quite as much income. And I think the type of empowerment that they might get from that might really depend on, the types of skills that they're provided. So considering that is very important as well. And then lastly, just a couple of reflections around, how conflict really shapes how you design.
I think we've lost Fatima. Yeah, we probably lost Fatima. She said her connection might cut off because of the electricity issues. All right. I think we can move on. If you all can take 3 seconds, perhaps. Oh, the slide is gone. We'll wait for Fatima to rejoin once the electricity is back. Fatima did give us a lot to think about and reflect on, especially around, what works and what remains to be done for girls in marginalized and humanitarian settings. I see many comments coming in for you, Betty. But as Jen has mentioned in the chat, please share your questions for Betty, Fatima, and Angela. We'll have a Q&A following their comments. And please type your name and your question and who your question is for in the chat. And I'd like now to invite our second discussant, Angela Nakafiro, to join us on screen. Angela serves as the Commissioner, Gender and Women Affairs at the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, and she works with the government of Uganda. As a Commissioner, she spearheads the development, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of the National Gender Policy. She also plans several programs aimed at achieving gender equality and empowerment. She's a chair of the recently established COVID-19 subcommittee on gender-based violence and violence against children in Uganda, as well as being a member of None in Three's international advisory group. She also served as a gender technical advisor for the Ministry of Education and Sports. And she's worked on many initiatives over the last 10 years. She served as a program coordinator for the Parliamentary Gender Budget Program. She also worked on the Public Finance Management Act, and she served on many committees and boards, including the United Nations Girls Education Initiative Global Advisory Committee, and the Forum for Women in Democracy, Development Alternatives, and Forum for African Women Educationalists in Uganda. Angela, thank you so much for being with us today. We really look forward to learning from your extensive experience and deep knowledge of the national policy context. So we've just heard how Betty's research fits into, the broader conversation on skill-based education, and then we also heard about the importance of her findings. Can you help us understand how Betty's research fits into the local policy context in Uganda, and perhaps more specifically, Northern Uganda?
Thank you very much, Samaya. I would like to thank you for the invitation to be part of this discussion. For the interest of connectivity, I'm going to switch off my video so that I don't face connectivity issues. So I would like to congratulate Betty. Betty is a colleague. We've known each other for quite some time. She's such a dedicated person when it comes to access to justice in Northern Uganda. And I'm really inspired that her research is on really ensuring that girls can access education, can have access to justice, and of course, rebuild their lives. In terms of Northern Uganda, really, this is a region that was disrupted by lots of conflicts for over 30 years. And for some of you in this space who have been survivors or victims of violence, but also conflicts, you know what happens when our countries are drawn into wars and endless conflicts. And by the way, for Northern Uganda, much as the government has taken quite a number of recovery, reconstruction, and development programs, the effects and the impact of the conflicts is still in people's lived experiences. And much more challenges also are coming in from South Sudan and part of DRC, where the aspect of refugees, and especially the districts that are across the borders, are still being influenced by the effects of conflicts going on. So for us as a country, really, much as Northern Uganda, the way Northern Uganda ended about 15 years, the effects are still there. And I'm not surprised that Betty is bringing out issues to do with the barriers that girls are facing. These are real. And in addition to what Betty has outlined, I would like to really say that also issues around negative social norms still impact on access to girls' education and access to justice. So much more really has to be done in terms of ensuring that there's total recovery in Northern Uganda, and girls have really the right to access education at all levels, and of course, access justice. In that regard, I would also like to point out that government has been undertaking the program on recovery, reconstruction, and development for Northern Uganda. I think currently we're implementing the third phase of the program, but still much more needs to be done in terms of reducing poverty levels and improving access to services in the region. I really appreciate the barriers that Betty has outlined. And of course, to us as a country, this calls for a comprehensive package in terms of promoting girls' education, where we look beyond examinations, where we look at the rights of the girls, where we are looking at the facilities and the infrastructure, and of course, where we are looking at a safe learning environment for everybody, the girls inclusive. And to that effect, government of Uganda in 2022 adopted a competence-based education. I know these ministries, the entire government is still struggling on its effective implementation, but to me, this is a positive development that probably Betty could highlight in terms of contributing to skills development. Because what we are seeing with a competence-based education, the young Ugandans and boys start learning the skills right from primary education, secondary education. It has not been well implemented at the tertiary institution and university, but the spirit and the commitment is there. So the integrated education model that Betty is recommending is really timely. And I would also like to request Betty that please reflect on the competence-based education system that has been introduced, so that in case you feel that there are gaps, then we can have deeper discussion on how to address them. The aspect of social norm change, I talked about it. It has really to come out very clearly, because most of the barriers that girls, including boys, are facing in accessing education, in accessing employment, in improving their agency, stems deeply from the negative social norms that are still prevailing in our country. That said, I also need to say that we've undertaken quite a number of programs to promote positive social norm change. We are under my program in the Ministry of Gender, Labor, Social Development. We are implementing programs against gender-based violence. We are implementing an initiative on positive social norm change, as well as positive masculinity, and promoting girls and women's agency, including in leadership. Quite often, women in Uganda have been doing relatively well in terms of leadership positions, which we celebrate as a country. I totally agree with Betty regarding unemployment. It is an issue in our country. And of course, because this is a big issue impacting on young people, especially those out of education and out of employment, the equally new programs that government of Uganda is implementing. I know Betty knows about the Uganda Women Entrepreneurship Program, the Presidential Skilling Initiative, where young people are trained and are provided with startup kits. Of course, given the fact that we are looking at young people, very challenging age group, some of them are not utilizing the opportunities that are given. The enablers. I like the aspect of the enablers, and I would want us to look at it more from an ecological model, and I think that is what Beta has done, where we are looking at the girls from a broader perspective, right from the family, the communities, the government institutions, but also in terms of the laws and policies. We have quite enabling laws and policy framework in the country. I think where we've not done well is in terms of matching the laws and policies vis-a-vis the social norms and practices and values. There we still have a very big gap. And of course, we welcome partners who we can work with in terms of changing the trends and of course ensuring that there's justice, there's access to justice. I like the aspect of girls, the skills that girls want, or the skills that girls need to thrive and contribute to national development. In our context, we also need to look at the skills from what's happening in the communities, because girls' dreams are also impacted on what's happening in the communities. If what they see women doing are nurses and teachers, the girls will also dream to become teachers, to become nurses, to become lawyers. However, we are also thinking about ensuring that girls can break through the male-dominated areas, and this is science-based kind of education. So there are initiatives to encourage girls to break off from the female-dominated fields of study and work into the male-dominated areas. Much more is expected in terms of building their agency right from primary education, secondary education, up to tertiary institutions. Conflict has been a very big challenge in our country, not only in Uganda, but in the Great Lakes region. What happens in Democratic Republic of Congo, what happens in South Sudan and other neighboring countries has a lot of implications to what's happening in Uganda. So we designed our education system and also looking at the peace education as an important component. So as a country, deliberate efforts are in place to ensure that we build a community, we build a nation that values peace, because we've had series of wars and conflicts right from our independence. It's of recent that we have stability and peace, relative peace in our countries. So the recommendations that Betty is recommending to the different ministries, in particularly Ministry of Gender, Labor, Social Development, and Ministry of Education and Sports are really justified. But of course, we need to go deeper in terms of defining what are the interventions that we expect from these ministries in terms of ensuring that there's justice, there's skills-based education, and of course, access to education. That calls for a multi-sectoral approach beyond Ministry of Gender, Labor, Social Development, beyond Ministry of Education and Sports. In terms of access to justice, we need the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs on board. In terms of sexual reproductive health, we definitely we need Ministry of Health to provide the services, including services that are required to prevent girls becoming pregnant, including ensuring that those who are subjected to sexual and gender-based violence are able to access the much needed services. But of course, at the end of the day, we would want to have a community. We want to see schools that are free from all forms of gender and sexual-based violence. So Betty, I think we'll need to have a deeper discussion so that we are very clear on what exactly the ministries need to do in terms of actualizing the recommendations that you're putting across. We are available to ensure that we learn from the study, we take advantage of the opportunities, and we are also able to contribute to the implementation of the recommendations. I know once Betty comes back to Uganda, we'll definitely be able to have in-depth discussion. Congratulations, Betty, and I would like to thank the fellowship for supporting Betty to undertake this important piece of work. Thank you very much. Yes.
Wonderful.
Over to you, Samaya.
Thank you so much, Angela. This is incredibly helpful for us to understand, the state of girls' education in Uganda, and also to find opportunities for collaboration between a ministry and Betty. We're very excited about that, and we know that there are many initiatives that are already in place to create more supportive learning environments for girls to thrive. So we're very, very excited about the potential for collaboration. We'll now move into our Q&A. Please feel free to keep adding your questions in the chat if you haven't already. We'll try to get to as many as we can. I see that Fatima's back. Fatima, please do join us on screen if you're able. Perfect, there you are. So perhaps I'm going to start with the first question. There is a question on, the contrast between the aspirations of in-school girls and out-of-school girls. So Betty, this is for you. Girls in school have long-term dreams, while the dropouts have survival needs only as their priorities, right? So the question is, what kills the girls' long-term dreams when they leave school? So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. I know you've had many conversations with both in school and out-of-school girls. Sorry.
Yes, thank you for that question. I want to thank Angela and Fatima for your insights. They are very rich insights. And of course, I will not leave here without, when I come back to Uganda, I have to reach out for further discussions with you. So about this question about aspirations of girls, of course, I talked to girls who are in school and out of schools. So the girls who are out of schools had children. I didn't have their pictures, but they have children. Many of them have dropped out of school. So I was very purposive in terms of getting these girls. So the girls' immediate need is not, at that time, is what is their immediate problem? They have children, so they want food. They want to survive. That was their immediate need. So when I was talking to them, they told me, we need food. We need to survive. We need health care. Those were their immediate needs. Much as some of them were planning to go back to school, but they were still looking at their immediate challenges that they were interfacing with. Meanwhile, the girls in school had long-term dreams because I think also they did not have children. They were still in the process of, they're in school. So they are thinking about being leaders, doing something to change not only their situation, but the situation of the society or the systemic barriers that they have. So that was the difference I was finding in my analysis. There was a big contrast because these girls have dropped out. They have needs. Some of them were farming so that they can have money. Some of them were planning. They told me they are saving money so that in future they can go to school. And they were thinking about skills training. So that was the difference I found in my discussions with the girls. And it is true that that is what they were telling me. I hope I answer your question. Maybe Angela or Fatima can add, but that is what I found while doing this study. Thank you.
Thanks, Betty. Any thoughts from Angela on how it's like for in-school girls and out-of-school girls in Uganda? And Fatima, feel free to add some insights from the work you've been doing globally.
Thank you very much, Betty. Thank you very much, Samaya. Really being out of school and out of employment makes somebody really very vulnerable. Even when parents are able to support, there's a limit to which they can support. So, of course, having being a mother, it means that you have to start fending for yourself and for your child. And in most cases, these girls are forced into early marriages. So that is a level of vulnerability that is young mothers are facing in Uganda. And of course, where we need to do our part is in terms of mobilizing them to start reconstructing their lives, to build their agency, to take advantage of existing opportunities. Working with government, there are quite a number of programs that at times young girls in rural areas don't get to know of. And of course, where we have civil society organizations and local governments doing their part, they can easily mobilize these young girls to be able to take advantage of these opportunities. So beyond being looked after, it's a stage that they need to start looking after themselves. Some of them are still young, so they need a lot of support. And part of my work is to really make sure that we mobilize these young girls. We open up opportunities like skilling, the kind of skilling that we are implementing as Ministry of Gender in selected districts, not throughout the country, are those that gives them hands-on kind of skills they can use to earn a living on their own. And of course, as a country, we need to do more in terms of empowering this vulnerable category of people. So them dreaming about really survival, for me, I'm not surprised because that is what is preoccupying them. They're not able to reach that level of dreaming big. But life can be turned around where all stakeholders are working together and targeting this vulnerable category of child mothers. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to add to that very briefly, some of my earlier work was on aspirations and young people, when adolescents are younger, they tend to have quite high aspirations, but we also see that there is often a gap between what they aspire to and what they're able to achieve. And a lot of that is shaped by their realities, right? So you may want to go to university, but you drop out at the primary level because your household doesn't have resources. And similarly, I think for girls who are out of school, for whom that transition has already happened, right? So they might have aspired to continue schooling, but they dropped out and are now married and have kids. It's very natural and expected, I would say, for them to have concerns that and aspirations that sort of reflect that. So I think even, from a research perspective and what we find on aspirations from the global evidence is reflective of this.
Thank you, Betty, Fatima, and Angela. There's a question on the role of boys and men. So knowing, the gender inequality present in many communities, in this work with girls, how are men and boys addressed, and how do you change their mindsets and earn their support? Betty, I'm curious if you've worked on any initiatives that included men and boys as partners in this journey towards gender equality?
Yes, Amaya, once again, in addressing the issue of patriarchy, in addressing the issues that these women and girls interface with, it is very important to work with men, because men hold the power and men can change decisions, and they can change the choices or the situations of these women and girls. In my community, you find they are the men who make decisions over land. They make key decisions in the family. So leaving them out means that you're not solving the problem. So in our work, even when we want to see the impact in the lives of women, we work a lot with men. And these men are husbands, they are brothers of these girls, but also they are men in offices or who are actors or decision makers. We work with clan leaders. We work with different men. But one program that we have is male champions. We train and work with them over time, and they are in different communities. So their role is to ensure that, first of all, they're having peaceful conversations with their families. They are having discussions rather than using violence. And so they're doing a lot of things to change the gender dynamics in their homes and in the community. For example, we had a program still with Oxfam. Yes, I remember Oxfam. It was about care work, to ensure that there's distribution of work in the family so that girls can go to school, so that women also have space to attend to their needs, for example, health needs. So we've had programs before, and we still continue to say that it's very important to work with men, because without working with men, we'll leave out solving some of the key decisions that affect women. So to me, I feel it is very important. And in my research, in this study that I did, the girls told me that the boys protect them from abuse as they go to school. Some of them escort these girls because sometimes they have to walk long distance. Some of these boys support them in doing farm work, and it helps them to get money. So some of the boys respect them and support their growth. Their fathers are also contributing towards school fees and the rest. So in doing this, like Angela and Fatima have alluded, is holistic. It needs the family, and in the family we have the parents, and the parents have men and boys and women and girls. It needs the whole community. It needs the institutions, and it needs government. So we need to work together, not only with men, but the whole system needs to work for girls and women. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Any final thoughts from Angela or Fatima on this?
No,
Yeah,
just
for us as a country, we realize that because of patriarchy, historically, men and boys are more privileged, more powerful, and of course, they have more opportunities compared to women and girls. And this is a well-embedded web of discrimination that has affected women and girls for some time. As Betty is emphasizing, we've really adopted the male engagement strategy to ensure that we can generate the support of men as allies in terms of advancing gender equality and empowerment of girls. Because quite often some of the barriers girls face is due to patriarchy and men misusing their privileges and power to subject women and girls to all forms of violence, but also denying them access to resources. So as a country, that is what we are doing, really appealing to men to be supportive to gender equality and women's empowerment. To a certain extent, is starting to work out. However, there's quite a lot of resistance. Men are not feeling it comfortable to let go of their power. So it's going to take a lot of time to really be able to generate total support in terms of men supporting initiatives that are empowering girls and women in Uganda. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela. Fatima, any thoughts from you?
Yes, just to say there's more and more research now. I think the point about including men and boys and engaging men and boys, it's something that, everyone recognizes as important. I think the question, at least from a research perspective, is, how and for what, and what combination of that is sort of most effective. But yes, there's more and more work happening on this, and the need is great, because you can't grapple with gender inequity while not engaging one of the genders. But yes, that's all I had to add, and just congratulations again, Betty, on this work.
Great. Thank you, Angela, and thank you, Fatima, for your participation. And sorry, everyone, we couldn't get to all of your questions, but please join us in the breakout rooms for the discussion. My colleagues will assign you to a room, and each room will have a facilitator and a note taker. You'll also be guided by a set of discussion questions in each room. And then we're going to come back together for a quick share out. So enjoy your conversations, and we'll see you back here shortly. Hope you had the rich conversations in your breakout rooms. I see people are still coming back. Apologies if we cut you mid-conversation.
I'm back. Sorry, I'd gone off. Network issue.
No worries. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone. I would like to invite the facilitator from each room to share a 1-minute summary of some of the key points that emerged in your discussions. Perhaps we could start with Betty from room 1, if that's okay. Betty?
Anya was taking the notes. Can you please share, Anya?
Yeah, I think we had a lot of, again, rich discussion in our room, and a lot of people were seeing a similar thing in their own education systems, that there was not a focus on relevant needs, and that the schooling was not rooted in the community needs. So we were talking about that. And then people also brought up the need about the cultural mindsets as well, that were playing a factor into whether schools and communities were supporting girls to get schooling and get access to critical schooling and to develop their skills. Some solutions that were mentioned were doing more peer-to-peer support and mentorship, working with the communities, building strong evidence, and sharing girls' lived stories. So thank you, Betty, for facilitating, and thank you, everybody, for participating in Breakout Room 1.
Thank you, Anya. Room 2, Faith, can I invite you to share with the rest of the group, please?
Thank you so much, Samaya. So in our group, we were looking at the situation on the ground in our different contexts, that is justice-oriented education happening at all? And if it's happening, why? How is it happening? And if it's not happening, why is it not happening? But also the second question was about how do we talk about this more? How can we amplify the voice around this, like all the other, issues on girls' rights? So the first question, I think there was a consensus from the group that we are not yet there in terms of implementation of justice-oriented education. Even where it's happening most probably maybe in primary education, there's universal access, but as we go up the ladder, there's still much more which needs to be done there. So we still need to do something. And even where it's happening, the issue of quality was raised by the group that we still need to look at quality. I think one of the participants even talked about the difference between public education institutions and private institutions. So you see the difference in quality in there. Then there was the issue of this should be looked at as a right for every child. So it shouldn't be just for some children because education is a right for every child in all our context. Then the other thing which was talked about is that we have seen even from Betty's findings that all systems need to work together. We are not going to be able to achieve this with a piecemeal kind of support to the children. Everything needs to be coordinated and work together. In terms of how we can be able to amplify this, there was a call for building evidence of what is working. That let's really, shine the torch on the good pockets of promise, which we are seeing practical examples of what is working so that people can see how it works when it's working. And that way it helps all the ideas to converge and maybe come up with models which are cost effective, which helps us to reach all the girls and work better for the girls. So we need to be able to work around building the evidence of what works and talking about it more in a practical way. Thanks so much, Samaya.
Thank you, Faith. Zainab, over to you.
Yeah, very rich, a brief summary, very rich conversation. It was mentioned with the first question that we might think about universal skills that are necessary everywhere, such as agency, leadership, comprehensive sexual and reproductive health education, and some vocational skills that depend on the context. But it was suggested that we don't forget digital skills that are going to become more important, and not to forget girls with disabilities that would have an added need to access this right of education. And they also mentioned these other ways, psychosocial support, sports, music, arts, as other ways to nurture the girls. And regarding the second question about raising the profile, it was suggested that skills-based education should engage with other discourses that are in the global sphere at this moment, such as life skills, financial and digital literacy, gender equality, girls' rights. And so there's a way to make clear that connection that would help raise the profile of a justice-oriented skills-based education.
Thank you, Zainab. Last but not least, Jen, are you there?
I am here, and thank you. I think we talked about many of the things that have been said already. I'm going to try to represent our group, but to be honest, there was a lot of content in this. I think first was a need to really agree and create consensus around key definitions and key goals. And so coming together to think about what is justice education, what does it mean, and that there's consensus around that and a clear idea of what we're working towards. Two was, and this is not necessarily in order, but two was to do a review of the policy and to have a clear understanding of like, what are the opportunities, but also what are the gaps, as Angela had mentioned, in the competency-based curriculum, in current affirmative action policies, and then also looking at policies that might have worked in other places and been brought in and look good on paper, but are they really practical and are they really what is needed in this particular context? And then, as I think Faith, your group talked about, the sort of piloting models and building evidence base and really thinking about, being able to show like what is working and how this works. And within those models, there was really an emphasis on the need to focus on working with girls to strengthen confidence, critical thinking, problem solving, that learning should be contextualized, also working with families, that should be part of the model, and mindsets within families, but especially bringing in economic empowerment of women within families, and then engaging community and other actors across the community as well, to build that evidence, to build to build models, strengthen models, but also really build evidence about what's working. And then the final thing that folks talked about was advocacy, and really thinking about, especially if we have a clear sense of where we want to go, we have evidence, how do we do advocacy around what it is that needs to change within policies? And importantly within that is, how do we strengthen advocacy platforms for girls themselves to be the ones who are really engaging in that advocacy? I hope I captured our group's conversation.
Thank you, Jen. And thank you, everyone. You gave Betty a lot to think about to continue to refine her work and her research. And as we wrap up, I'd like to invite Betty to share a few closing remarks.
Yes, thank you, Samaya, and everyone who has participated. I just want to say thank you. You make me proud. The Q team, our coordinating team here, and my fellow scholars, thank you so much. And all the participants from Uganda, I love you so much. I'm soon coming back. So I just want to end by saying that meaningful change is possible when education, skills training, and community support are aligned with lived realities and aspirations of girls or learners who face systematic barriers. So together we have a responsibility to ensure that every girl is recognized not as a victim of circumstance, but as a central agent in shaping equitable and hopeful future as a whole. So I just want to say congrats to everyone who participated. Uganda team, you make me proud. Thank you so much. I want to hand over to Samaya.
We've heard a lot about the Uganda team, and I also want to say thank you for joining us today. And thank you, everyone, as well, for your active participation and engagement in Betty's workshop. I just want to say that we have one final workshop in 30 minutes led by Zainab Gates, who you see on screen. And some of you have heard from in the breakout session. Zainab will be presenting on Indigenous teachers in Argentina, where she's from. You can find more information and register for her workshop on the symposium event page. And I believe my colleagues will also drop the link in the chat. And I just want to remind everyone the deadline to apply for the 2026 Echidna Global Scholars Fellowship is in just 11 days. Please visit the Brookings webpage for more information, and thank you again. Right. Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.